Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to another one of my videos. Anyways, a few weeks ago I did a quick preview on Final Fantasy IX and that game is a bit special to me. I remember enjoying it so much 15 years ago, but it's also a game I've only played that one time 15 years ago, so I really can't wait to get back into it later this summer with the HD sprites and everything looking a lot better. Even if there are a few muddy palettes and some of the things may not look quite right, for the most part, I thought the HD remake is good and I recommend it to everybody. But still, I was going, man, I remember when playing through a Final Fantasy game was a treat, and why isn't it anymore? Anyways, after reading an article from Game Informer that came out about the same time, and I'm a subscriber to Game Informer, they talked about how the Final Fantasy series is in a bit of trouble, and the director of the new Final Fantasy game thinks so too. And Game Informer also went out of their way to point out that the Western RPGs are doing a whole lot better than the JRPG. Now, Game Informer is far from being a supporter of the JRPG genre. They kind of trash it and they got in trouble with their Zestiria review. Now, I do agree with their review somewhat on that game, but I can understand the annoyances that some of the Western RPGs sometimes they get a pass, even though they're not perfect. However, in this case, I think they're wrong for another reason. It's not that Final Fantasy is still as powerful, but the niche for the Japanese RPG community is growing smaller. No, even in the Japanese RPG community, it's falling behind. As a lover of that rather nerdy genre, I have since moved on to the Tales franchise as my number one go-to game franchise for my JRPG fix. Even on the Square Enix side, Final Fantasy is kind of getting trashed in content by its siblings. Games like Dragon Quest, Star Ocean, and if they ever decide to make it a franchise, The World Ends With You are doing better. And let's not forget about Kingdom Hearts, that it has pretty much already surpassed Final Fantasy. In fact, Kingdom Hearts should be the barometer to show just how much Final Fantasy has fallen. The original game was supposed to be about a kid who fell into a world full of Disney characters and Final Fantasy characters. But in the last few years, a lot of the Final Fantasy has fallen off. In the last decade, just how many new Final Fantasy characters has been in a Kingdom Hearts game? The answer is only one, Zack Fair from Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, and only as a small blink and you will miss him type cameo. It's like Kingdom Hearts is trying to forget its Final Fantasy roots. The original game, after all, borrowed plenty from Final Fantasy IV. So what went wrong with this franchise? Well, it's kind of hard to track down one single thing where it went wrong, but let's start off with technology. It has changed and changed a lot in the last 20 years, and that has changed the JRPG. You played a JRPG from the SNES and PS1 era, and it's definitely going to be different than playing one today. Today's are more action-oriented, a lot more story-focused, and more in tune of trying to make sure it's one cohesive world, rather than having turn-based gameplay and focusing on exploration. First time a Final Fantasy game felt a lot different than I expected it to was Final Fantasy X, with its somewhat linear feel to it. But I still really enjoyed that game. Final Fantasy X-2, its sequel, I also enjoyed too, but not as much and for different reasons. As far as Final Fantasy XII, don't remember a darn thing about its story, but it was because I was too busy collecting items on the site to give a real flying hoot about its story, but I still had fun. It was the most different Final Fantasy game there is, but I still had fun. No, the first sign that it went into trouble territory was with this game right here, Final Fantasy XIII, and oh god, was this one a disappointment. Don't get me wrong, it's not the worst RPG I've ever played, but it wasn't an enjoyable one nonetheless. Where do I get started on this crap heap? I know, let's start off with the woman on the box, Lightning here. Now recently I heard Square Enix actually rented her out as a model for some sort of clothing line. And you know what? It fits. She has a personality of a freaking mannequin. or she at least aims for that. What little humanity slips through is she is thoroughly unpleasant and quite the B word to deal with. And granted, I know it's hard not only for the voice actor who voices Lightning to pull off this type of character, but for the writers too. We're normally used to female characters to be the emotional types. It's because women are the ones that are more in tune to emotions than men are. Let's just put it this way. When you were a kid, how many times did you lie to your dad and get away with it? Almost always with me. How many times did your mom catch you before you even started? Almost always. We're used to women being able to discern these little emotions, so an emotionless female character is a bit of a gender switch, which is kind of unusual. But don't tell me right away they have to be an unlikable, and I hate to use this word, but bitchy character. Meet Mila Maxwell from the Tales of Xillia series. She's cut from a very similar cloth as Lightning. Mila, being raised to believe she's some sort of guardian deity and raised away from humans, doesn't have much experience with them or emotions. What we get is a person who is socially awkward and lacking in quite a few social graces. That said, unlike Lightning here, who is an absolute mess, Mila learns that the feelings and ideas of her comrades are worth figuring out, and it can be funny when she makes a mistake. Throw in that she is paired with a male counterpart who is shorter, more feminine looking, and easily the more emotional of the duo, and you get two characters with a lot of charm in their gender swapped personalities. This brings me back to my main problems with the Final Fantasy series when it comes to Final Fantasy 13, because it never seems that Lightning learns anything, but the rest of her crew are also unlikable as well. They are either bitching about the fact that their fate now sucks to the point where all but one sees no hope, and that one is annoying as hell, and I wouldn't cry if he got hit by a bus twice. If they're not doing that, they are turning on each other. Now, I did say I like my Tales games because the team dynamic often have them in conflict, but those are friendly conflicts. Big difference in teasing people about their cooking than wanting to kill them because you blame them for the death of their mother, and that's all the characters have one reason to turn on each other, and it's just never really fun. The only likable person in this group is Saz, and he's the racial stereotype. How bad is it to say the best character in the game is the racial stereotype? Add in a whole lot of confusing terms in a game that has more convoluted storytelling than any Zelda timeline, and you've got problems. Add in a battle system that also needs a lot of refining, in a game so linear it makes the original Super Mario Bros. Look like an open world sandbox game, and we got huge problems. In the end, Final Fantasy 13 is picked on today because it's a terrible RPG. It's not the worst one I've ever played, but it's far from being the stellar example that is Final Fantasy. But rather than leave this disappointment in the wastebin of history, SE decided to do something else. Make a sequel! And the sad fact is that the original was so disappointing that this fan nearly skipped it. If it wasn't for my younger brother telling me how good this game was, I would have skipped it entirely. So what was good about the sequel? Well, first they fixed the battle system and made it a little bit more non-linear, but they also fixed the story. No longer were we on an unlikable team where everyone is trying to kill each other for various reasons for most of the plot. No, we were with two characters. One of them was in the original game, but she was more of a cameo. And then we also took on the role of Noel, who looked at first like he was rejected from a Kingdom Hearts game, but it turns out, no, he just comes from a post-apocalyptic future in which he is the last man on Earth, literally. He manages to find a way to time travel thanks to Lightning, who has become some sort of goddess for some reason or another. Yeah, Final Fantasy 13-2 never did fully kick the problem of being way too convoluted for its own good, but it's at least fun this time while doing it. He recruits Lightning's younger sister Sarah to help him. Square Enix, if you do have to learn something of the current generation of Final Fantasy, take a look at this one, because here you came really close to a great game. Why? Because I like how well Sora and Noel get along, and they aren't Lightning and the others. Noel comes from a time where humanity has pretty much ceased to exist, and although that gives him a perfect opportunity to be emo as hell, he's not. He's optimistic. He's very open with Sarah, and he's a very likable character. He knows this is his last chance to save himself and humanity, and he ain't going to screw it up. Sarah also has a personality and emotions too, and because she looks up to her big sister Lightning, we actually kind of grow to appreciate Lightning through Sarah's actions on her quest to find her. My only complaint about Final Fantasy XIII 2 story is that it ends on a cliffhanger, with Sarah dying and Chaos being released to wreak havoc on the world, and that it convinced me to buy Final Fantasy XIII 3 Lightning's Return. Well, I did do some recording for this video. I doubt I will ever do a full run through and video review for this game. Why? Because it would take too much time to research. No, not on the game's lore or the aspects of the combat system, but rather how much beer do I have to drink to be drunk enough to give a crap about the pain I'm going through by experiencing this game, but still be competent enough to play it, and how long can I stay that drunk before I start to do permanent damage to my liver? Basically, the game takes 500 years later during the eve of the apocalypse. Lightning has been restored to human form to be the savior and has been tasked by God to save the souls on the planet so he can transplant them to a new world. Yeah, this is Lightning acting as Jesus. Well, that is if Jesus was sent to Earth to restore the cycle of death and reincarnation, because that's not exactly what Christians believe in when it comes to the afterlife. And when I think of Lightning's role in the Final Fantasy series, I don't think of her as a savior, quite the opposite. Anyways, right away there's a problem. You only get to play as Lightning in this game, and it's just her for the entire game. And if you think she's any more likable since the original game, you would be oh so wrong. Right away they say that her humanity has been stolen from her by God, leaving her more of an unlikable pain in the ass to deal with, and it gets better. You see, the anti-villain for the game is this little girl who just pops up everywhere to torment Lightning. Well, it turns out that this little brat that does terrible things is actually Lightning's missing humanity. So her missing humanity is evil. Why am I supposed to care for this person again? Just asking. Oh, but it gets even better. Now, before I get into this, yes, I know the religion of Japan is Shintoism. I get the bare bone basics of that religion and its polytheist beliefs. Anything and everything in nature has a spirit and a guardian deity attached to it. So the idea of saying to people who have this belief that there is only one God is kind of akin to saying, I love tyranny. But this game's ending is just beyond cynical, as Lightning killing God, and the whole reasons humans live on Earth now is because Lightning killed God, while quoting Nietzsche of all people. God is dead! The game was just so dark and cynical, and the characters so unlikable, I never really wanted to touch it again. It's probably the easiest game I've ever had to give away, and it really made me feel bad playing it through again and having that cynical ending. Throw in an over-the-top convoluted battle system with a messy customization system, and you got a game that's just a freaking mess, despite having a large open world, which was the problem with the first one. And that's the problem with the entire 13 series. There is really no joy or warmth for most of it. Some parts of the second installment, but not much. The whole thing is to be a cynical mess for the sake of being a cynical mess. Most of the characters are completely unlikable, and those that aren't end up being meh at best. And for those who have seen my Tales videos and wondering if I shot Marta and Emil in the head, how much do I hate Lightning and the crew in comparison? Well, let's put it this way. I view Tales of Symphonia, Dawn of the New World in the same way I see Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Certainly not a good movie, and it has characters that pretty much ruin the movie for everyone, and a lot of people hate them for that. But in the same way, it's kind of fun to pick on those said characters and the story that exists in the movie, and it can be fun to watch if you're in the mood to kind of just bash the hell out of Jar Jar Binks. Same way with Marta. I like to bash Marta because she's an annoying character, and I dislike her for what she does to the story. but I don't exactly loathe her. Tales of Zestiria, I would say, is Attack of the Clones. Its plots and characters are boring, but there's enough flash there to get you through the story. And if you're in the mood to watch anything Star Wars related, you would watch Attack of the Clones, or if you had a friend who wanted to experience it and hadn't watched it again, you could see it yourself watching it and surviving the experience. It's not that bad, it's just that it's bland and forgettable. I would put Final Fantasy 13 and 13.3. I would compare it to Star Wars The Holiday Special. Haven't seen or heard of it? Well, pirated copies of it do exist on YouTube. And before you go berserk about me saying pirated, unless you're over 40 and were able to see it the first time it was broadcast, it's the only way to watch this movie is probably a pirated version through YouTube. But let me just say I would rather have my fingernails pulled out of my hands while my groin is being tasered at the same time rather than watch this holiday special. I saw it last Christmas on a dare from my brother's girlfriend and woke up half sick from watching it. It's that bad. Final Fantasy 13 story comes pretty close to describing it on just how unlikable and boring it is. So what are my suggestions for this franchise? First, stop with the convoluted storytelling. I get it, you want to be the Lord of the Rings in scope, but being so convoluted that you have to have an encyclopedia with your games does not make your story more enjoyable. It makes them confusing and a headache to get through. For an example of what I'm talking about, in The Lord of the Rings, we really don't need to know or care exactly what an Istari is or that Gandalf is one. We do know that he's a wizard, and that's all that matters for 99% of the readers. But in Final Fantasy XIII, we are forced to care and constantly deal with phrases like Lessie, Falsey, and Seath, and other complicated terms that require a constantly updating in-game encyclopedia, and it makes my don't give a crap alarm ring really loud. Make the story simple and easy to understand, and if you do get complicated, make it some fun while doing it. Kingdom Hearts, which is only convoluted because it's a long-going JRPG series with a story of 7 installments, at least makes it fun. Yeah, the whole Xehanort time-traveling aspect makes no sense, but we do understand why he's doing it and what it means for the player. It means we get to beat the crap out of more bad guys that we thought we finished off. Final Fantasy XIII wasn't that fun to deal with. Also, lighten up just a little bit. That's one of my criticisms. I can definitely launch at Final Fantasy 13 series and a lot of modern Final Fantasies. Is this need to be dark and cynical that it's the only way to be edgy? No, the answer isn't to be dark and edgy, but know when to be dark and edgy and when to be a little bit light. Great masterpieces like The Dark Knight knew when to lighten things up and have a little bit of humor. Constantly being negative brings people down, and most people don't play to be constantly dark. So bring in a few light moments, and yes, Final Fantasy does know how to be lighthearted. Final Fantasy X-2 was definitely light-natured, especially for the series normed, and I enjoyed it. Granted, the magical schoolgirl's transformation and the constant barrage of Japanese pop culture, I can understand why that game may not be for everybody, but even in Final Fantasy IX, which has more cartoony visuals at areas of the game that could be quite dark, its overall story was melancholy, talking about the legacy people leave after their deaths. On the character side of the Final Fantasy series, make sure the characters are likable or at least relatable. Yeah, I get it. The cold, unemotional emo douchebag is kind of popular in Final Fantasy. And if you want to make another Lightning as a main character, that is okay. But you better make the side characters in the party worth bonding with and helping him out with his emo-ness. Because if I get another cast like in 13 where the main character is an unlikable, unemotional douchebag and then all the other characters are either annoying or just plain out loathsome, then the Final Fantasy brand will be dead. Basically what I'm saying is I would rather have another adventure with Emil and Marta than have to put up with another Lightning in her crew. And yes, I know it's a little bit more complicated than just being a likable. If you get a character that's too good, he can't be a good hero because part of being a hero is overcoming your faults. Sora from Zestiria is exactly what I'm talking about here. He's kind of boring because he has no faults. but there's a difference between having a few faults and weaknesses and then being completely unlikable. And if you do decide to go down the unlikable route, it has to be a journey between overcoming these huge faults and becoming more likable and heroic. It was done well in Tales of the Abyss, but even that is risky, as a lot of people put Luke on hated characters list because they stopped playing the game well before it was done due to his antics. Make sure that the character is flawed but relatable. I do want people I enjoy watching and participating in the tale, not people would be happier if they were ran over by a freaking bus. As for gameplay, I don't own a PS4, so I can't play that demo, but rumors has it is going to be more like Kingdom Hearts. While I don't know if that's necessarily a good way for the Final Fantasy series to go, having more open and easier to control battle system will be a good thing for this franchise, and giving more control to me, the player, will also not be a bad thing for the franchise. And yes, I do kind of want an open world, and heck, if they can fit it in, I would love to even have a flying ship. It's been a while since we've had airships in a Final Fantasy game. And another thing they need to do is probably stop a lot of these spin-offs and sequels. Now, a few of these have been good. I did enjoy Final Fantasy X-2. Crisis Core and Dissidia are two fantastic spin-off games. But a lot of these are just meh, and the sequels only seem to make me want to go back and enjoy the classic games again, not because I enjoyed the sequels so much that I had to go back and replay the original, but no, I had to go back and replay the original just to remind myself that the first one was actually good because the sequel sucked so much. Oh, and one last thing, stop making Chocobo sexy. Good lord, even the furry crew probably thinks that's weird. And I want to end by saying I don't hate the Final Fantasy series. I've just been disappointed with it for so long. It needs to improve on the story. It needs to stop being so dark, emo, and cynical for the sake of being just those things. Your classic things were these things a bit, but they did it in a way that it felt natural, and it wasn't always about being those things. Have a sense of humor in Final Fantasy 15 and have a sense of whimsy and fun. It's a fantasy game after all, is it not? I'm expecting great things from you, Final Fantasy 15. Besides, I have to have something to play until Kingdom Hearts 3 comes out. Anyways, this is Tommy the Game Master. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below.